producer is a good script editor and also script writer. So the two have gone hand in hand, although this gentleman started on the show in the Troughton era, before Mr. Letts was involved, and he's written many memorable scripts. Please welcome Terrance Dicks. I think I'd like fair that next we bring on the two beautiful ladies of this panel so they can sit in the middle and be surrounded by their male admirers. And so first we'd like to bring on a key companion for John Pertwee, and that would be the lovely Katie oh, she's just fine. Actually, stay right there, you're fine. Good.
Yeah.
Good. I'd like to welcome the other key companion from the John Pertwee years. I'd like to welcome Elisabeth Sladen. Katie has just walked in. She's a little bit to recover. So let me call on next a key member of the unit staff who serves as a captain, helping the doctor on many occasions, Richard Franklin. The very immodest Richard Franklin. Oh, those are the shoes. Those are very exciting shoes. So, is Katie ready?
Yes.
Oh, good. Now we call on the blonde bombshell of the 1970s in Doctor Who, Miss Katie Mann. And now the gentleman who leads us all and fights the good fight, Mr. Nicholas Courtney. Sir Nicholas Courtney. I apologize. We're very uneducated over here. I mean, you must forgive us.
Well, I wish I had a knighthood, I wish I had.
I'll buy you one.
Okay.
Please share.
Sharing.
So here's how this is going to work. I am prepared.
Oh, it's the rock fighter.
She has, that's why she's on her knees.
Darling. That's all right, I think they heard me.
She's on her knees as a mark of respect to us.
What is that?
Yes, yes.
The way this works is that I have some questions to ask for our honored guests, which I hope that the audience members actually won't be asking, if you're copying me. But I'll ask a couple questions, but please, people who want to ask questions, please again walk, don't run, don't fight, to that microphone and make a line, and then you can ask your questions when I cue you in. How's that? And please ask questions. We have 6 laudable guests up here who deserve great questions. Because, by the way, the other list, do not let your questions be lame. No lame questions. Big men will also come in and beat you up.
Leave answers as lame.
Oh, the answers can be as lame as you want.
Yourself.
Good. Okay. I would like to start with lovely Miss Katie. If Nick will be so good, just give her the microphone. Can you give Katie the
Of course.
microphone?
I don't mind just leaning over.
Leading over. Leading over.
I had a question for you. It is known that you are a personal friend of Liza Minnelli. And also, I believe that the two of you, and I want to be clear on this, had an appearance on Ruby Wax Meats.
Yes!
Which,
So I'm told.
oh!
I saw it.
But we read about this and in America. It involves, now, I could be entirely wrong here, please correct me, it involves some dog imitations, maybe.
Well, having met me now, does it seem very odd to you that I might suddenly, in the middle of something, go like this?
Hold that.
Right. You know, I had a reason for that.
I didn't want to be in the camera shot. And so me and my wisdom thought that if I crawled across the floor and squatted in corners, nobody'd notice me.
Wrong!
Well, they're doing it. And Liza sung into her shoe.
Could you tell us a little bit about your friendship with Liza and what Ruby Wax entailed when you weren't sneaking onto the set?
Well, they'd actually started out the show that they'd gone to Texas to interview her, right? And Liza decided that she'd like to sleep for 3 days. And Ruby was not a very happy little Vegemite. And so she decided that she was determined to get her back. She's a lovely woman, incidentally, Ruby Wax. She's really nice. And anyway, so she decided to get her own back. And when we were staying at the Savoy, I know. As I said it, I went, oh, here I go again. I'm just going to crawl.
You mean stretch us?
Yeah, that's it. So she came to interview Liza there, and they rang me and they said, oh, please, come into the room. Well, I had to tell you, the room was the size of the TARDIS. So, you had to sort of be, kind of on the outside edge to try and avoid everything. And then they promised me the cameras were off when we were chatting and one thing, but they weren't, but that's cool, who cares? And I certainly don't. And but Liza and I have been friends since the age of about 12, when we went to a tutorial school called Miss Dixon and Miss Wolfe. And that's where we met. And we became firm friends. And we have been friends now for 40,000 years. And she's also a godmother to the twins. In fact, it was Liza who decided that they should get christened, because I thought we just took them to a library and got them stamped. But she said, no, we have to have a party. Liza likes a party, so I gave her the pleasure of a party. As her last wedding was yet another party. And I got into trouble because I sent them a fax on the wedding. Oh, in fact, I was in such trouble that he never spoke to me. But they're separated now, it doesn't really matter. And I said, darling, I'm frightfully sorry that I can't make this one, but I promise I'll be at the next one. And just add that Liza and I together is very, very scary.
One question for Elisabeth, please. Again, I'm trying to find a question here the audience won't ask, but you have a daughter who is trying to variously enter the acting profession. And I know that Peter Davison also has a daughter who had aspirations of being an actress, and they said this movie was hard because they wanted her to do well, but that acting could be a very inhumane profession, that so much of it is contingent on how tall you are, what's your hair color, and it can have nothing to do with you. What advice and support do you give your daughter as she continues on her acting path, shall we say?
My daughter is far more upfront and adventurous than I am.
Is there more? I'm sorry.
No, it's not.
Is that on? Yes. She is her own person, and I have done something really, really right with her. She is at university. I'm sure that she really thought, well, I really don't want a degree, but I will go because if I don't go, I've earned it, I've got my 4 A's, and I will see what it's like. But I will do drama and Spanish, but actually I'm going to do English and Spanish, but I will do the drama on the side. So she's not part of the drama course, but I don't know, she must have done something right in the barn, in the theatre they have there, which is actually just a little chicken shed, really. Just not very different from some of the places we may have played professionally. And they chose male and female to do a workshop with Samuel West. Sadie was one of them, and so she's done a workshop with Samuel West. She has really auditioned for RADA, for Guildhall, she's got recalls, and she said, I talked my way into the recall. I think my auditions were crap, actually. I wasn't very good on that day. But one of the questions to her was, well, how would your parents, they asked what the parents do, blah, blah. What would your parents say if you left university? And she said, well, they can talk, can't they? So, I don't know. She will do what she wants to do. She's very caring, very loving, and no, it's really hard, and yes, she's seen the hard side. So I think she finds herself so lucky that she knows what she wants to do. And whatever she will do, she will be part of the business. So, you know, I will support her in everything she does, but she's 20 next week, which is still very young, but she thinks it's really quite old and she should be active by now. So. And I really, at one time, didn't think I would come here. She said, look, Mum, you have to go. She said, you've worked so hard on Doctor Who, you deserve this. I mean, it's just a logic I didn't ever possess. I'm very proud of her. Thank you for asking that question. Thank you.
Question from the audience, please.
Well, I'll start by confessing I spent most of the time sitting in the video room watching Perfect Doctor era, and when you watch them in a row like that, you begin to wonder which script caused most trouble.
Maybe we should turn that to the Letts and Dicks team. Which script caused you the most trouble? Well, I guess let's ask Barry, which script was the hardest to produce for television?
I think the answer to that will be any script by Bob Baker and Dave Martin, who are brilliant, who are brilliant but mad, absolutely mad. And reading a Baker and Martin storyline is like taking mescaline. So they tell me. You sit there and you think, yes, that, okay, then they go there and that happens. And gradually reality begins to slip away from you. I mean, the way they got there, the way they arrived on the show was weird. A script arrived on my desk, which was a comedy about national service, the draft, which we used to have in England. You had to do 2 years. And I sat and read through this, and it was very funny, very witty, very funny, moved along. But nowhere did the Doctor appear. And I eventually got in touch with their agent and pointed this out, and she said, oh my God, that was supposed to go to Light Entertainment. But I was so impressed with it that I sent for them, which, you know, I sometimes thought was the biggest mistake of my life. I mean, their first storyline ended with the pilot of a spaceship crash landing on a planet while at the same time mutating into a giant carrot. I think it was something along those lines anyway, and that was one of the clearer bits, you know. But they were good, and I persisted and persisted until I got a storyline out of them. Well, no, I didn't actually get a storyline out of them. I got their latest sort of infusion, and then boiled it down to something that made a sort of sense. And I wrote the storyline for them, and sent it back to them and said, go away and write that. Which they did kicking and screaming. And they hated me for a long time because in a show they did called Claws of Axos, where the Axons come to Earth and they have this wonderful substance which they demonstrate. And I wanted a more dramatic demonstration, and I insisted that they put in a scene where the Axons take a rat and magnify it to enormous size. And this really hurt their artistic sensibilities, you know. And Bob said to me years later, he said, we felt like Scott Fitzgerald, he said, you know, in Hollywood. Okay, it's a great script, guys. All it needs is a giant rat. I insist that it did need a giant rat. I stand by my rat. So anything to do with Bob and Dave could drive you out of your skull.
When we came to it, we couldn't get a rat, so we had a frog instead.
Barry, which script did you find the hardest to, you know, bring to life on the television?
Well, as funnily enough, not when I was producing, but when I directed. I directed Patrick Troughton in The Enemy of the World. And it was the most difficult script for 2 reasons. One, I arrived as the director for the run-up period to the, actual shooting, and was presented with one draft script of the first episode, needed rewriting, and the other 5 episodes didn't exist. And they gave me a rough synopsis of what it was and said, well, go away and do your casting from this and get your locations and so on from this. Well, one of the things I did at that time, it was the custom to try and get somebody who was sort of like a star or mini-star, somebody whose name was known in the business, to be in the show as a guest star. And I found Mary Peach, who at that time was very well known. And I had to persuade her. I said, she said, I don't know whether I want to be in Doctor Who. She'd been doing rather highbrow sort of armchair theatres and things. And I persuaded her and so on. I said, well, it's like being a Jane Bond girl. Well, they might make you famous, you never know. But anyway, so she said yes, she would. And indeed, the costume they gave her was rather like one for John, a Jane Bond girl, and she was fine. And while all this was going on, these scripts were being screwed out of the writer, who was Daisy Whittaker. And who's dead now, bless him. But anyway, episode 5 arrived. Still 6 didn't exist except for the twinkle in his eye. And episode 5, and the character that Mary Peach was playing wasn't in it at all. And I persuaded her to, to be the star. And I had to go back and say, for heaven's sake, and so we had to take the Doctor out of it and put Mary Peach. It was just ludicrous, just silly, silly, silly. And then, of course, I compounded the error because I had come from doing, first of all, a soap. I'd done a soap called The Neighbours, which you had to work very hard, but it was very simple shooting, to doing Z-Cars, which was a cop show, and it was a twice-a-week shop show, like I've done a number of those. But I thought, right, now this is my big chance to show how clever I am. And so I worked out, one of the things you have to do as a director, you have to put down, once you've worked it out, a running order of how you're going to shoot it, right? Maybe not in order of scenes. This is as it was in the studio the day. You've got to shoot a 25-minute show in an hour and a quarter, literally. So it had got to be that you've got to know exactly what you're going to do. Do this, do that, do that, do that, do that, one by one, and get it, and then you edit it together later, see? Now, my production manager was a very experienced man, and he came to me after I produced my first running order and said, Barry, he said, this is a running order, not for a half-hour Doctor Who, but for an hour and a half play for today, which would have 3 weeks rehearsal. He said, you haven't got a hope in hell of getting all this in. So I cut it down and cut it down. And I got great big ideas, like, for example, I was going to shoot, in fact, I had shot Jamie's double, that's Fraser Hines' double, walking towards camera in a park. Because we couldn't afford, couldn't have Jamie in the park at the time to play the scene when he sat down and talked to somebody. Because he was busy on the previous shows, you see, because they were doing one a week. And so I had and I had a back projection screen, and I had this double walking, and the camera was on it, and another camera there, and this was, we had to record it as if it was a live show, I may say, because otherwise you wouldn't have got it in an hour and a half. And so Fraser was watching him, left, right, left, right, and Q Fraser only walked into shot on the other camera, so it looked as if he'd walked out of the park and sat down on the park bench. And I was doing stuff like that all the way through. The result was that I forgot to look at the way the actors were acting. I forgot the point of drama, which is to make it dramatic and so on. I was so concerned with all these clever ideas that it was hell's delight doing the thing. And frankly, I'm so ashamed of that one episode of End of the World that's on the Berkeley for years. I was really shocked when I found it had been rescued, you know, because it's really very bad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Hi guys. Barry, you had spoken in an interview, I think it's on the 30 years anniversary video, about how you had gotten some feedback to make the shows less scary. I think you referenced the policeman in Terror of the Autops. And I was wondering how much of that you got during your years. Was that a big problem? And did you ever sit down with Terrance and have an idea for something that you just really thought was great, but then hesitated on because you thought it might go too far? Did you ever change something out of that fear?
Too scary.
Not in so many words like that, no. So for people who haven't heard the story, Terror of the Autons, which no doubt you've seen, there's a scene where a couple of policemen rescue the doctor, I couldn't give his name at the moment, the doctor. That's what's called a senior moment. Yes, and Katie, and they were in the car together, which we were shooting in the studio, as far as I remember, with back projection and all this stuff. Anyway, point is that the doctor got suspicious because of the way they were driving, where they were going. So he leaned forward and said, "Excuse me," to the policeman sitting next to the driver, "May I see your warrant card?" Meaning, "May I see your badge," in effect. And the policeman turned around and looked at him, and the doctor leaned forward and peeled his face off. And there was the blank face of an Auton, an android. And we had a letter from Scotland Yard, from the top police organisation in the whole country, the Commissioner's Office, saying, "We do understand, of course, why you want to have good shows and you want to have sensation and all the rest of it, but this doesn't really help us in our attempts to persuade children that police are our friends, you see." And so please don't do it again. And there were other things, like a troll doll coming to life and strangling people, and they said, I don't know whether it was true, that the children were frightened to go to bed because they were frightened that their teddy bears or their dolls would come to life and strangle them, and so on, all this. And it was in one of the big tabloid papers at the time, it was Tabloid 9, the Daily Express, there was a big article in the central pages saying, "Why my children will never watch Doctor Who again," referring to all this. And there were questions asked in Parliament, and the managing director of television sent us a memo. I can't tell you. So,
honored to cause this much trouble.
So anyway.
This is our first season.
Yep.
Thanks, Barry.
Yeah, I
I'm and I haven't even started.
It was in fact, it was Katie's very first story. Yes. Yeah.
Wasn't it the Master?
It's the Master's very first story too. Yes. Anyway, point is. That we got absolutely smashing ratings for that one as the next story. So we were forgiven, but we were told to watch it in future, in effect. So no, there was never an occasion when we looked for, we would have liked to have done a special scary story. It's just that there was a general feeling between Terrance and myself that we've got to watch it. And we just watched it. Or, there was never anything specific that came up.
So you've got the demons with the devil.
Oh well, the
demons.
demons. Yeah, that's right. The demons, of course. When Katie was going to be sacrificed on the altar and all that stuff. We originally we were actually going to do that in the church, in the village church. And just before we were going up, we'd actually, the director I was producing, not directing that one, the producer, the director had actually gone out and started filming, and he was coming up to this scene. It was only the exterior stuff that was being done on filming, exterior filming. We'd have built the interior of the church in the studio. So there's still time for that. But the head of our department, who was in effect the executive producer, called me in and said, "I will not have this. I mean, it's like doing a black mass, in children's." It wasn't a black mass. We were very careful about that. They didn't say the Lord's Prayer backwards. They said Mary had a little lamb backwards. So for sake. So we had this brilliant idea. We'll make, there's a pagan cavern underneath the church, and that's where it all happens. And so that's what it. So he was still able to do all the exterior stuff. They came running out of the church and running into the church. When they went inside, which was in the studio, they found a door which took them down into the crypt where it all happened.
Thank you. Actually, I have a question for Terrance before going further. I understand there are many delightful stories about Katie Manning, but to you, it would appear there is one that is called The Katie Mann's story. Is this correct?
Yeah, I'm a bit hesitant about telling this because I wonder whether, yes you did. as will emerge. I wonder whether it might embarrass Katie, but then on the other hand, I'm not sure it's possible to embarrass. This is something that happened, and I mean, you know, comedians always say true story, and I think this is so sort of neat that it doesn't sound true, but I swear to it really is. We did, many years ago, a small two-person convention together, just a pair of us, being toured around, somebody got this idea of running them, and touring them around university campuses in America, where there's always a good cold Doctor Who fan. And you know, this was going very well, very, very successful. And one night when we had a big kind of student crowd in, and this is possibly embarrassing a bit, sometime after she left too, Katie posed for a photo spread in a magazine wearing not much more than a Dalek. Now, one of the students there, one of the, you know, probably some horny student, had got hold of this idea, possibly even got hold of the magazine, and he was hell-bent on asking a question about it. You know, he really wanted to know if this was true or not. And the system they had there, since there were just the two of us, they had two lines, and they alternated the question. This guy's imagination was so overheated, he got it in the wrong line. And when the chap came to the point and said, and now the compere said, and now a question from Mr. Dicks, he grabbed the mic and said, is it true you once posed nude in a magazine? And before anybody could, you know, correct it, I said, it's a filthy lie, I deny it. And the very embarrassed compere said, I really think that was a picture from it, that was a question from this man, but really, really happened.
All the shame and disgrace that goes on amongst these people, it really is tragic. So, yes, please.
This is a question everybody you can respond to. One of the unique things about this era that was calling the unit here is the sort of regularity or stability of the crew, not only crew with the same producer and script editor, but also the core cast, not just the lead, but with unit and all the other people around it. That it seems, with so much time together, you must have been able to sort of develop into a kind of extended family. And I was just wondering how that atmosphere affected your work and your memories of that time, and you know, in general, what that aspect of it was like, and how it affected the show and your work.
For the better. Can I just correct you? It wasn't a quartet, it was a sextet. John Levine lives.
Do you want anything to say about that?
Oh. Certainly, it was a wonderful feeling. I've never enjoyed it. I enjoyed so much going to work every single day, and I'll never forget how frightened I was when I actually left, and I had to go and work with other actors. I thought I may have to give up acting, although there are some who say I never took it up. But you know, it was extraordinary. You know, the learning process for a young actress in that time was amazing. You know, from Barry and they were so wonderful, and they took such care, and we all took great care of each other. And I think that, you know, and I think Liz can sort of bear that in her time too. You know, the closeness, and I think most of all, what that brought out was the fact that everybody had this 150%, this absolute focus of each episode. We wanted it to be the very best we could give, and that literally did come from the ensemble. You know, with John as our leader, you know, who kept us in tow, because you really had to work very hard, and there wasn't a lot of time for falling around on the floor laughing and, you know, being silly, because a lot had to get done. And I really think it shows when you look, you know, with various television series, you can see where there's a wonderful nucleus of love and warmth and respect, and I think that showed enormously in quite a few of the years of Doctor Who.
That's why it was so terrifying in a way for me to join, because I was joining something that was whole when I came upon it, and I realized how much John was going to miss Katie. It was very, very obvious. And
you were the perfect person to fill that part.
put in on. And John initiated me into all your little rites of Harry Roy.
Harry Roy.
No, we all had to get together at the beginning of every episode and clear the nasal passages. And there was an old comedian, band leader. Oh, I don't know who it was really. Oh, at least I'm too young for something. You had to stand there around the mic. The poor salmon, I think they used to go like this. Harry, let's do it. Harry Roy. And then everyone would step off there. But it was a wonderful atmosphere.
But hang on, I think it's time I spoke with. Pat Troughton had another thing in his time, in praise of Tony. They used to say, I crave news, my lord. Now that could be, Harry Roy's very good, gets the mouth around the little syllables and all that, but Pat Troughton did, I crave news, my lord. I thought I'd tell you that.
Later on, we had a director called Timothy Coombe. And John said one day, the trouble with Harry Roy, I mean, even then he was like back to the 30s. He said, and really nobody's heard of him. And they don't know what I'm talking about when I get them doing it, but I think Tim Coombe would be a good name for that. And he had everybody chanting, Tim Coombe.
The difference between Pat Troughton and John Pertwee is that Harry Roy, of course, was the musical era, and news, my liege, my lord.
I crave news, my lord.
No, I knew who it was. It was the point, darling. I have craving, and so that was the difference in the two actors. Really, was one came from that background and one came from the other. But Tim Coombe will live forever.
A little bit of useless information, but quite sweet. I don't know if anyone knows, but Patrick Troughton, he filmed Henry V with Sir Laurence Olivier, and when Olivier was behind the camera directing, am I correct, he stood in for Olivier in the scene. Yeah.
Personally, I always found that Harry Roy business extremely embarrassing, and I think that quite a lot of the crew found it pretty ridiculous as well. He didn't do anything for my voice. Yes. But, when I made the comment at the beginning about quartet sextet, the fact is there were 6 of us, and the reason I think why that our period got better and better and better is the fact that it was an ensemble. And you get only in very expensive theatre companies, you get this wonderful opportunity to work with the same group of actors and directors over a long period of time. Really, it's not a thing, acting as an actor, it's not a thing you can do immediately you leave drama school, it's a thing that you mature into, and it should get better and better and better. And also the companies themselves get better and better and better the longer the people are together, and that of course is expensive. That's why in Western Britain we have some very fine companies which have been economically shaken, but we still have a very fine national theatre which is extremely good at the moment, and when you see the benefits of people working together for a long time.
I have one question for Nick before we get back to you. And sir, I think many of us here are greatly impressed by your voice talents. And I was re-listening to the Oh No It Isn't audio recently. And
Woolsey the Cat.
You make a magnificent Woolsey the Cat. Everyone hear that one? Those of you who haven't heard are missing out.
There was a, I think I can say this, there was a wonderful line in that from the director, Nicholas Briggs. When I play the cat, and it's Dick Wilkington, I had to say, hold on to me, Dick. But you see, I had to say that, but I said it in the right way, if you know what I mean.
We overheard somebody at this convention. I don't know who it is, you don't have to raise your hand. In fact, someone saying that Nicholas Courtney, his voice, it's just like dark chocolate. It's just very seductive. So really my question is, have you done, but beyond Oh No It Isn't, have you done voice work, well actually, beyond the audience, you did voice work we're probably not aware of, and that you are particularly proud of?
Voice work?
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think actually, because at the moment I need a good voiceover agent. Do the cat? No. Yeah. Oh no, I won't do the cat. I didn't say that anyway.
voice work. Well, I'd like to do more. You see, the great thing about doing voice work is you don't have to learn the lines. However, you have to do your homework. And, well, the voice work, yes, well, I had a year on the BBC Drama Company, which is wonderful. Not only drama, current affairs, art, and everything. It's a wonderful job, actually, being on the BBC Rep, because everyone comes in. There's no tension at all with all the biggest names. They come in, and for some reason, when you're doing a play or television, everyone's a bit nervous about the hierarchy and all that. It doesn't happen in radio. And I had 18 months on the drama company, and that was lovely. The dark brown, yes indeed. But you see, Donald Siddon gets all my work. That's the trouble. No, he doesn't really. He doesn't really. I like to do more voice work because, yes, I'm blessed with a good voice. And that's probably my biggest asset as an actor.
Sure did finish with that.
Someone else told me that. Yeah, but I can't sing, for God's sake.
He doesn't sing, he talks, which is very sexy.
Oh, okay. I'll be sexy.
On the subject of voice, might I just mention one thing? I embarrassed myself terribly in a stage production I did once, which was directed by a very famous director, who, alas, is now dead, called Eric Thompson. And the play was an American play at the same time next year, which we did in the West End at Prince of Wales Theatre. And I'm afraid I'm awfully bad about knowing what people have done or who famous people are. It appears in one ear and comes out of the other. I don't sort of think that way. And when I got to the first day of rehearsal, I went to the rehearsal room and I suddenly heard this voice. I said, "My God, it's Dougal!" which is the little dog on Magic Roundabout. And it was actually my very famous director who I never met. Well, I had met him when he really cast me, but that's the only time I met him. And it was, in fact, Eric Thompson who did this children's show voice of Dougal.
Don't forget, of course, Tom Baker has top billing in England about the film of the Magic Roundabout. You know that. He's got top billing. He told me this the other day. Because his name begins with B. Which is very helpful. Very helpful. He also told me the other day, Tom, that he had a difficult time doing that because in his contract, apparently, he said, "You know, Nick, and I can't really say Tom, I wouldn't dare, but you know that I had to, in the contract, I had to have 7 recalls." So Tom lives in France, as you may or may not know now, so he'll be whizzing back from Toulouse and London a great deal. But, I mean, Tom in Little Britain, give it a round of applause. Give it a round of applause.
If the letter B is a good one for getting work, what do you think it must be like having the letter F?
Well, I was going to see.
Question for the audience, please.
That actually is a good lead-in for what I wanted to ask, which is about the big values that listening to you make more worked on. Could you talk a bit about your experiences doing that? And Mr. Franklin, are you interested in doing that soon? And would you please?
He's on one. He's on the venue audio.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
What are you talking to me?
Wake up, the back engaged. Wake up, wake up.
The thing is, I didn't hear what you said to start with. I had to have the question interpreted. Big Finish.
Distracted by Katie. It's just.
I would absolutely love to do a Big Finish, and if there's anybody in from Big Finish now, I'm available to sign your contract as I leave the room.
Big Finish before me, I think he's done a lot more of the Big Finish than I have. It's rather lovely to resurrect a character many years down the line and imagine, because this is what the business is about, and pretend, take a leap of faith of where they would be now. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, but it's rather scary because in anything I've done, I've never been lead. It's always been a little way down. And with that comes a lot less responsibility. And you know, you can get away with a little more, can't you? They don't come to you. They went to the doctor.
Yes, therefore.
They got the back line, you know, long lines. And when you play a character you played before, and it is the Sarah Jane tapes, as was my case, it's really, really difficult because you know the shortcuts. You know what makes this character work, and other people will take longer to get there. It's almost embarrassing how quick you leap on it, as you obviously do with the Brig and your character.
Captain 98.
Thank you, Katie.
It was my first scene with Nick in a car. And John came up and said, "Are you really getting me there?" I didn't quite know what that meant at the time. I did later when we nearly went in the ditch. So yes, it was great. We're going to do some more, so lovely.
Well, likewise.
Katie, you were playing a pre-established character because Irish Wild Time had been around for a while. How is it the character presented to you to play?
But they couldn't think of anybody else who could play her. That's basically the bottom line.
She really is splendid as Irish.
Yeah. I'm not as great as Liz. I couldn't take that leap of faith. But what they've done to me now is exactly what we're doing. Apparently, the next Irish Wild Time is on her own. No doctor. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Iris conducts herself without that helpful little influence. Gets her, out of the bus on time and not too drunk. She's got to be the first time lady who drinks and smokes, really, isn't it? Which is kind of
I'll give you advice, huh?
I love her to death, and I love doing the cabaret number, which, as I said to Liza, I said, I'm afraid I borrowed a bit of you when I did that cabaret song. I love it, and they're lovely people to work for. They really are. I mean, it's just a great day. You don't stop, do you? I mean, you sort of shovel a sandwich down and they pay you.
And they pay you on exactly this. They pay you at the end of the day.
Yeah, pay you on
That's
the same
nothing
day.
for actors, You don't wait for your money, you get it at the end of the day. Yeah.
And a sandwich. I mean, what more than that do you want?
Nick, which is your favorite Big Finish production you've been in?
Well, I think Spectre of Lanyon Moore. I mean, it gave me a chance. It also was nice because then I worked with Colin Baker. Having done the rest of the Doctors, got Colin Baker and Thomas McGann. But it was a very good script and very well directed by Nicholas Pegg. It was a good script, and Jimmy Bowler and Susan Jameson, and great cast, and a good story. And Nicholas Pegg knows about the Cornish Moors and their own story. And it was a cracker. And I think it was Colin Baker here, and he said, "What are you doing here, you old reprobate," or something. I can't remember the line. It was lovely. Immediately we're in the studio, and it was good. Because Colin was a great guy. We both had the same age, and we're very happy.
Yeah, we love Colin.
Next question, please. Please applaud just for one call. Good? Okay.
I have a two-part question, but I'll be quick. There's a real fear in the air here about the new series. But it's easy for us to forget that everybody on stage was involved with major changes to the program. And I was wondering if I could get some comments on how they keep the tradition alive and yet have the courage to say, well, we're going to just stand them on Earth for a little while and stuff like that. And breaking in a new doctor, some of the actors had to do that. And also, were there ever any moments during like rehearsals or shooting or anything in the middle of the line where you sort of just stopped and looked around and said, wait a minute, this is nuts, we're nuts, what the hell are we doing?
Maybe we should start the direction question with Barry for the reason that ultimately the direction is up to the producer to a large degree. So what can you comment on about the fears and concerns of the direction the new series might take? Speaking of some of the craft entirely new direction.
It's very difficult. I'm going to go right off tangent for the moment. A while ago, a couple of people from the other side of the world wrote a book called Doctor Who: The Unfolding Text. I don't know if anybody's come across it. Yeah. I don't know whether it's a popular book or not, but I was given it to research, not to research, to review for Sight and Sound, which is a British magazine. I read it. Excuse me. And it was at the time when in English at the Indian universities was very much into this business of deconstruction and semiotics and all that crap. And it did it to Doctor Who and to me, because I was interviewed for it and I was told I didn't really know what I was doing. I had discourses which they had to deconstruct and puzzle out and so on and so on and so on. in a word, I, at the time, thought to myself, well, this is ridiculous. They've got all these hidden motives that they're ascribing to me, when in fact, what we were trying to do was to get a good story with good actors, get the company going, and get it on the screen in time. And that's what we were trying to do. That's what they're trying to do now, and I think they'll do it. To try and give them advice when I don't know what they're doing is just silly, as far as I'm concerned. I've already said what at other panels, a whole string of things that I think make up what a good Doctor Who story is, and a good approach to Doctor Who is. And I think that applies right across the board, from the beginning in Hartnell's time to Verity Lambert, and I hope will go on indefinitely for the next 40 years. When it's failed, as it certainly has at times in the past, is when these various things weren't looked after, i.e. good story, really good company who worked together, good director, etc., etc., etc. All these things were lost. I mean, it's simple. If you get a good group of people together, and you all are, as Katie was saying, are all focused on doing the very best you can, it's going to work. And I think that's what's happening now.
Here.
The second part was a really awkward moment or a line where you just stopped and thought, what on earth am I doing? Is that true?
I can say that John Pertwee did that about 12 times in every rehearsal. Saying, what is this supposed to be? Or for God's sake, what would you do? Or, I can't say that, I don't understand it. You know, that was just kind of part of his working routine to settle his nerves. You know. And I just throw that in.
It's perfectly true. Whenever he got a line which was either real science or something we made up to sound like science, a bit complicated, he would say, I can't say that. No, I have to simplify it, you see. And we say, well, go away and if you come up with something that says the same thing in a simpler way, then he'd go home and he'd learn it. And once he'd learned it and got the rhythm of it, he could say it perfectly well. And he'd come back into rehearsal and forget all about his worries. This happened over and over again, as Terrance said.
And there was, in the story of the Three Doctors, which was really sort of two of the big doctors, there was a major confrontation eventually between Pertwee and Troughton. And the reason for this was different acting styles, because John, as Barry said, once you got him through his 1001 niggles for the script, would go away and learn it and have it absolutely perfect. Patrick, on the other hand, would give you a rough approximation of whatever he felt. You know, if the line was come in and sit down, he might say that. He might say, "My dear chap, have a seat." Or, "Why don't you come and sit over here?" You know, almost anything. And it always made sense to the story. But improvisation in that sense was not John's forte. And he grumbled at Patrick about this. And Patrick said, "Now see here, don't worry about what I'm going to say. Just worry about what you're going to say." And John said pathetically, "Until I hear what you say, I don't know what I'm going to say." And they sorted it out eventually, but it was...
I remember that first day of rehearsal. And Patrick came and sat next to me reading Transcendental Meditation, probably a very good thing to read. Now, when they first met, Pertwee and Troughton, I lifted my newspaper up. Katie looked out the window, we wondered what was going to happen. We observed what happened, and it didn't take long before, but I can't top Terrance's absolutely right. But I remember Katie looked out the window. How's it going to work? And I pretended to bury myself in the newspaper, but all was well.
As it always is.
I can't top Terrance on that, I do that, it's very funny. But But I mean, John, I'm sure from the box, always did carry it off with the scream of the blonde, but he did actually on the floor still have a little bit of trouble. And you know those wonderful cups he had on his sleeve? He used to stop them. Lizzie, is this the scene with that? Have you got a pen? He used to put his cup back and write the word on his hand. He sometimes talked so fast, and John Monk worked in such a way that he tripped over himself sometimes. So sometimes he just couldn't get his mouth around the word. He knew what it was. So he looked down at the cup, and there it was. It was just
Look at those gestures. It was a Marlon Brando thing. Now Marlon used to look off into the distance. Sorry.
Oh, yes!
He was looking up the cup dance. We don't have Marlon Brando.
How do you look at a cup if you don't... Well, I don't know.
Oh, because it flops, duh.
These cups weren't that big.
White, yeah, frill.
Very well,
Out
carry on.
of the velveteen jacket.
Look at those gestures.
And sometimes
at the floor.
musically as well, we had to reverse the polarity of the neutron flow. We had to really sing sometimes.
He called me over about that when I was in the rehearsal hall, and he called me over and said, tell this line here, and I thought, another bubble, you know. And he said, I said, what like John? He said, reverse the polarity of the neutron flow. And I said, I see, I mean, do you think it's a bit tricky? Do you want me to try and simplify it or something? He said, no, he said, I like it. He said, you can sing it to the tune of the sailor's hornpipe. And he said, in the start, they reverse the polarity of the neutron flow. And it somehow, after that, I used to try and work it into the script.
Just about that line, you know, I mean, I was always a stickler for, when it was possible, accuracy in science and so on, and spelling and things. I mean, Terry Nation, I remember, put in his script computer room, spelled C-O-M-P-U-T-O-R. And that got all the way through the design department, and I came down to the studio and they were painted up, you know. So, and on another occasion, this actually wasn't, there was in a script which was sent. Einstein's equation was rendered as m equals EC squared. And it easily could have got through. But in fact, you see, reverse the polarity of the neutron flow is absolute rubbish. And, well, this is the point, you see, Terrance says it, says who cares. And in fact, I think the first time it came, was in Inferno at the end of our first season, which we'd been responsible for getting written and so on. And I suppose I haven't got it's not the courage exactly, but the experience as a producer to say, you know, that is scientific rubbish, especially as John loved it so much. And in fact, it's become like Nick's chap with wings, 5 rounds rapid. It's become one of the legends of Doctor Who.
You were asking the most embarrassing line, and whether one regretted halfway through the line saying it in the way one was saying it. Well, I have a little story of a line of mine, in which I unfortunately didn't regret it until I got to the end of the line, and I'd already said it. It's also a little story which demonstrates what an extremely brutal man Barry Letts is. And also, just let me finish. Just wait.
Yes, carry on.
And also what an extremely kind man Barry Letts is. This was in the Terror of the Autons. I think, was that my first one? And what we used to, you need to understand something about the way we used to do Doctor Who in those days. We used to do the filming first. And so you were obviously doing things from the end of the story, which you didn't possibly know the beginning of it if you hadn't looked at the script carefully enough. And then we would say all the filming was in the can, then we'd go into the studio and we'd rehearse a couple of weeks, and then we'd go to the studio for a couple of days and record the studio stuff. Now, in those days, for the sake of the economy, and we had to be very economic in those days because we didn't have the budget. Barry didn't have the budget that the new series is going to have, anything like. Anything like. So we had to be very careful not to have more than 2 takes. And also, what they used to do was we used to record the stuff in the studio. And then, when a bit of telecine, which we'd already done 2 weeks before, came along, we'd all stop. They would play the telecine over the studio monitors, and we'd all sit and watch what we'd done 2 weeks before. And that would be put straight onto the tape. I think I'm right, okay. We'd put straight onto the tape. We would then go on with the next bit of stuff, acting in the studio. Right, Terror of the Autons, climactic scene. All these Autons and the Master are coming over the hill, and Eunice, led by my brave friend on my right, had our guns, which is a very sensible thing to shoot an Auton with, and I was leading my platoon or whatever, and I had this line, and I did try very hard. I did work for you, Barry. I did my very best. I mean, I was only trained at Rada.
Tell us.
Yeah, well, I'm building up to this exciting moment.
We only got another half hour.
I should only need 25 minutes. I pointed my gun at this Auton, and I turned to, must have been Nick, and said, "We've got them now, sir!" And the whole studio, it was on telecine, it was so over the top, it was awful. The whole studio just fell about, and I felt so embarrassed. And then there was a pause. It took about 2 minutes, and Barry came down from the producer's gallery, I think it was called, took me aside and said, "This is why he's so cruel." He said, "Richard, I wanted everyone to see that. I wanted you to see it. I wanted you to see what going over the top means." But he said, "As this is your first filming, this is where kind Barry comes in. He says, I'm going to allow you to redo that shot, which we never ever did. So thank you very much, Barry."
Hi, some of you I've gotten to know over the years, and some of you I meet for the first time here. Seeing you all together, though, I just want to let you know, it's a concentrated wave of fond memories that comes back to us. And I want to, on behalf of hopefully everybody here, I want to tell you how much you guys taught us about the power of friendship, and gave us some really cracking good stories, which sometimes we really needed at that point in our lives. And it's what a big part of our childhood, you guys were.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
My question is, for I guess all of you, but particularly for those of you who have been in the service, what's a better way to see the world? Doctor Who? Or I guess what I'm really trying to say is, did you ever think in a million years that you would have done as much and seen as much and gone on all these other separate ventures as a result of this job you did in the 70s?
I don't think anybody did, really. I mean, when I first came, they were talking about the show being cancelled, and I thought, this is great, it's like getting a job as cabin boy on the Titanic. But, you know, going back to being a freelance, I thought, well, okay, 3 months regular money, can't be bad, you know, because they gave me a 3-month contract, you know, but they weren't at all sure it couldn't work out. And I thought, okay, they'll fire me out. I then learned that my 2 predecessors had been fired for incompetence. And so I thought, okay, they've got to pay me for 3 months, then I'll go back to writing again, and that will be an experience. And there went, I think, virtually the rest of my life up to this moment. And, I really had no idea that that would happen. I mean, how could you? I joined Doctor Who in 1968, before you lot were born, mostly. And here I am still banging on about it. So it's quite amazing.
Yeah, it's so true. I think back now. Oh, I'm sorry.
Choices.
It's so wonderful to think that, no, we didn't know. We knew things were rumbling and changes, you know, in terms of the ratings and so on, which, yeah. But we did know there were little things kind of, and you know, people started to come up in the street and sort of, but, you know, by the time I left it, because I came in 1970, I think, that by the time I left it, it was only it had suddenly done this little curve, you know, and the rest is history. But I mean, it's extraordinary, as you say, to find yourself sat in here in Van Nuys, you know, And the reason we did it, well, of course, was for everybody who's now watching it. We had no idea it would be America as well. You know, none whatsoever. And Australia. You know, so it's and Canada, which I got told off for forgetting today. I'm sorry, my maiden friends. So it's very exciting to have been a part of that. I mean, it's just great. I can't think of anything better in my life I would want than to have been part of something like this. And the new one, can I just say something about the new one? I had such a good feeling in my waters about the new one. Because, well, no, it's that gut feeling. And you know, women probably get it more than men. But, you know, wasn't it, they all grew up on Doctor Who. So I think they're going to give it exactly what you said. I think they're going to give it that love, and they're going to give it back. And it's modern, and it's now. And that's the, you know, I think that's where it has to go next. And I think that's terrific. I'll shut up now.
You never know. You never know with this program what spin-off is going to spin off. I mean, about 3 weeks ago, I live in Brighton by the sea, and the local paper, Brighton Argus, came to me and said, would I please comment on a piece of extremely expensive modern sculpture that we put up in the town, because it looked like a TARDIS.
Was the question about did we think we'd visit all these parts of the world or planets? Well, you see, as far as I'm concerned, I'm putting it here, I didn't want to go to other planets. Actually, I don't. I'm afraid everyone else, Discovery, Voyage, I don't want to. I'm more concerned with this world, but that's my business. That's why I was well cast. The Brit didn't want to go to other planets, except when he was forced, you know. I'm fairly sure that's crowing, you know. So that, I believe, was the question, did we want to? But I've been lucky. I've been around the world most of my life. I grew up abroad, so I've been around the world. And that'll do me, but I'm a Luddite, aren't I?
Seriously?
No, spit it on.
Oh, I think it'd be so exciting.
Oh,
Like most people think I
no.
already have.
Lizzie, sir.
Yeah, definitely. Lizzie's been trying to speak.
No, I don't know what to say to that, really.
Come with me.
Oh, God, Katie, going in the next room with you is enough. I'm trying to be mad, I'm so boring. You see, it is weird, it does make you think. It's a job. And when I did it, it was a job, and it was wonderful because it was the nearest to repertory theatre I would ever get on television. And it was very, very hard to leave, but I needed to go because I loved it so much, because I couldn't bear to be asked to go. So I had to say to go, because I would have been so sad if people had got sick of me. You have to leave people wanting. I had to go then when I felt I couldn't do any more with it. But, you know, listening to Nick and...
Yeah, leave them wanting more is the old theatre. Don't take that.
It's gone beyond cult. It's gone to tradition. There's not really a week goes by that something referring to divertitis in reference does not come up in a newspaper.
Who is always used. Anything to do with who is always
They will
used.
grab it. It is quite bizarre. It is now tradition. It is not cult anymore. It's beyond. And to be part of that is still quite amazing to me. And sometimes it's too big a responsibility because you think you'll be found out. Yes. And that's why America was so good to me, because you had the video recorders. I didn't want to be part of Doctor Who in England because that was the next companion. You know, it was almost bad manners.
Yeah.
But now I'm so unashamed. I would be part of Doctor Who forever. And thank you. I'm so pleased. I'm sure that wasn't the question, but I was just sitting here thinking. Sorry.
One question along the lines of the show's longevity is, some of you, as we discussed, came in 1968, 1969. At that point, it's probably expected that these shows are going to be broadcast once, maybe repeated once, and that's it. That's all. In what year, or at what point, did you realize, oh my God, people are, this is not going to be broadcast once. people are going to watch this again and again and analyze it and dissect it. And what year did you realize that it really was just a one-off production?
Well, I can come in briefly. I think it was John Pertwee who persuaded the BBC that they had a hit about selling it abroad. I think I'm right, Barry. I'm sure John did that. I remember him telling me. John was responsible.
I'm sure he told you this.
You see, you think I'm being too charitable, do you? Well, maybe not. But no, John told me in seriousness, he thought this, because John had a commercial mind, for heaven's sake. And you know, BBC, at that time, I'm British now, I know, listen to me. At that time, BBC didn't like to sell things. Come on, you know what I'm talking about. And John had a commercial mind. I rest my case with that.
Yes, but John told me that he sailed around the South Seas with their old Flintman. He raped most of the South Sea Islanders and he cut their heads off and all sorts of things.
No, you missed the point, Richard.
Now, Barry's the man for this answer, I know he is.
We sounds as if we're being absolutely horrible to John.
I'm being very nice to John.
But John, he was. We had the expression in England because of a civil servant who used it during the Falklands War. No, it was after that. About being economical with the truth. And that was John. You see, he was an entertainer all the time. Even when he was in private circles, you know, you'd sit down and he would tell stories, tell anecdotes, always about John Pertwee, but always very good anecdotes. And each time he told them, they were edited a little bit and embroidered a little bit. And so after 5 years, they bore very little relation to the Journal of the Truth he started, but they were much, much better stories.
Hyperbole is allowed. Hyperbole is allowed.
About Nick, we were sitting on stage at a convention together. Before we would go, we did a tour across America, John and I remember, and a few of the people would follow us around from city to city. And John said, listen, we've told this story a few times, let's spice it up a bit. And I was on stage with Nick at a convention back in England, and John held forth with this story about a very funny happening, what had happened to him. And Nick turned next to him and said, that's my story.
Well, John once got it wrong when we were together, and the iPad, we were talking about the iPad, and John got it wrong. Liz was there, I said, no, John, actually, it was Caroline John.
Oh, it was Katie, it was Caroline. John and I used to make up wonderful stories together when we travelled. I mean, he had the most wonderful creative imagination. And when we travelled, we'd go through all these wonderful little towns in England, and we'd take the names and we'd create butlers and maids and the lord of the manor out of the names of these towns. And it was the most fun thing. So that creative truth, you know, for me was absolutely thrilling because I'm prone to live in a fantasy world. And, you know, he was so great to be with.
He never switched off, did he?
No, and I don't either. So together, you know, it was terrific, and his mind was so alert, and he had this wonderful child in him, and that was one of the things I loved so much. Was he loved to play, you know. He was just gorgeous to work with.
I want to keep track of the time, so you three guys are the last, okay? Anyone who didn't ask a question, sorry, we're quick enough. So, next question, please.
Yes, my question is for the ladies. I was wondering the circumstances in which you two first met, and have you had the opportunity to work together yet?
You didn't notice me when I first met you. We were to do a radio program, and you were in the studio in your very platform shoes and your white fluffy coat. And you left before I could say it, and I followed on. It was a radio program. You were being interviewed.
He said how lovely you were.
Oh, thank you.
Oh yeah, you're kidding.
I went up to
every day.
I went up to the bar the first night of filming. My darling, he said, come and have a drink. Now, what would you like, Katie? And he First of all, that he missed you, and then what he'd said to me. It really was a kind of choppy start, because I just realised, what I had to film.
I would love to work with you.
I would love to.
I really, truly would.
Let's all speak English. You're right, and we'll have guest appearances.
Yes, that's right.
Are Gary and Jason in the room? Can we sufficiently humiliate them and encourage them to do this?
We'll talk.
Next question.
I wanted to ask a question to Mr. Dicks. First of all, the reason I wanted to ask you the question is I feel you've given an honest answer because I read once in an interview that you came out in a television movie screaming about how much crap it was. You've given us so many iconic things to the history of Doctor Who, things that stayed with the show. And I know that you co-wrote the War Games, which featured the Time Lords for the first time. And in that story, the Time Lords were presented very godlike and very powerful. And I was wondering what your opinion was of how the series carried them in later years, as to whether you thought that they were handled correctly or you had wished that they'd stayed more with your original ideas.
Well, the reason for the change was not me at all, it was Bob Holmes. And Bob, was a character. He was a person with very strong opinions and could be very bolshy, very difficult. I think, quite simply the best Doctor Who writer ever. I mean, absolutely. But he could be awkward, and he was very, very obstinate. And this was, in fact, I think pretty sure it was after my time. We had used the Time Lords occasionally popping up in a lordly and superior fashion and sending the Doctor on a mission and then disappearing in a puff of smoke, and that was that. We never really got to know much more about them. And I remember Bob saying to me after he'd written this particular show, The Deadly Assassin, he said, I hate bloody toppy-nosed, sniffy, all-knowing, superior alien races, he said. they keep popping up on Star Trek and sorting everything out, he said. And then sometime later, this was after my time, he did The Deadly Assassin, in which the Time Lords were shown as devious, evil, corrupt, hypocritical, political, much like the Senate or the British Parliament, And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a knockout. And if you've seen any of the books where I use the Time Lord, they're Bob's Time Lords. They're nasty, sly, conniving lot.
One more question after this, Jen. Somebody wants to come on up here. Okay, go ahead.
I had a question for Barry regarding when you were executive producer of season 18 in 1980, when John Nathan Turner took over as producer, and I was curious what your creative input into that season was and what you thought of that particular season.
Well, I should explain first that, as I said earlier, the post of executive producer wasn't one that was common in the drama department of the BBC of the day. The job that the executive producer does was done by the head of a particular drama department. We had 3 drama departments: the drama plays, drama series, drama serials. We were part of drama serials, so our executive producer was the head of drama serials. Well, now there was a reorganisation of the BBC, and they combined the 2 drama departments of series and serials into one, and gave it to Graham MacDonald, who was my boss. And this was just at the time that John was taking over, and I think Chris Bidney was going to take over as script editor, so that there were 2 new people taking over. And he said, he asked me to go in, and he said, look, he said, I've suddenly got twice as many shows to look after, twice as many people to look after in the department, because he was the sort of father figure of everybody was employed by BBC ran in those days. It was like a series of separate kingdoms, so to speak. He was the king of a twice as big country. And he said, would you mind, in effect, doing my job on Doctor Who, you see? Now, I knew quite well what the head of department did. What he did was to see the scripts when they came in, when they first were done, when the producer was happy with them, and made any editorial comments that he wanted to. Then he would just be there, making sure that everything was ticking over, just popping in occasionally to the studio, and is everything all right? Yes, fine, and wandering off again. Making sure that he was there if he was needed to help with the organisation. You see, if there was more money needed or something, the producer would go to the head of department, the executive producer, as I was, and say, I desperately need more money for this studio. I'll see what I can do. I'll talk to the bosses, etc. And then you looked, if you were doing the job, you looked at the final thing after it had been recorded and edited, but before it had had its final dub, before the music was put on it, so that alterations could be made if necessary. Now, the main purpose of this was editorial, rather than creative, because it meant that you represented the BBC, and you were making sure that there wasn't too much violence, or there wasn't something that was overtly political, which was going to get the BBC into trouble, like we've had seen recently, or whatever it might be. So those are the two big things: the script at the beginning and seeing the final thing at the end, and making comments about these to steer the thing in the right direction that you felt was right for the show. Now, I went one stage further than that, because Graham had said to me, he said, I'm asking you, he said, because you provide continuity. He said, because of your connection to the show in the past, he said, if you can do the job at the same time as you're doing your own job, which I was the producer of the classic series, he said, but the main thing is to be on hand for Chris and John to make sure that the show keeps going on the same lines, you see? Fine. Now, I felt that this gave me carte blanche to have a look at the scripts and make creative comments, which I did. And John wasn't a great script man. Chris certainly was. So what... when Chris, he had trouble with Chris over one of his scripts, I think. But the point is, why I say Chris
is lovely anyway.
Yeah. Why I said Chris was a script man was that he was interested in that and keen on it and wanted to get it right. John wanted to do everything else the producer, but he wasn't really interested in the nitty-gritty of the script, as I was. So I rather, at that point, took over John's job, because I would make a lot of notes about the scripts, especially ones with new writers who came in and didn't really understand the Doctor's way of looking at things, and maybe things didn't make sense, because I always felt that the main thing in a science fiction story was that ultimately it must make sense. People shouldn't be puzzled saying what's going on now. You know, like we said about the TV movie. Anyway, so I would go along to John with these pages of notes. This was at the beginning, and he'd say, well, yes. Well, you go and sort it out with Chris with you. See, so I would go along, and Chris and I would have a script meeting. I wouldn't speak to the writer directly, but my points were taken on board, and then Chris was sorted out with the writer. Now, that was at the beginning of my time on it. After a bit, once I thought Chris had worked his way in, I did it less and less and less. And I only did it for a year. And I regretted all my life that I put my name on it as executive producer, because everybody thinks that during that year I was responsible as producer for it. But I wasn't. John was the producer. He did the job. He did all the things that I'd done as producer. And indeed eventually cast Peter Davison with my approval, because he had to refer it upwards to make sure that I was happy as his technical boss. But he did all that, and my input was confined to what I've just told you. Everything else was John.
I think we're out of time. Now, don't move. Don't move. In here, we're going to have, where's Sean? Yeah, okay. Sean's going to come up here and say what's in here next. We're having closing ceremonies at 6. Is the dealer's room still open?
No.
No, the dealer's room is closed. So, do you want to come up and take over this way? Let's have a big round of applause for our guests.